We on radio?
No, we're on Facebook Live. Okay. Family, go ahead on the tag and share.
All right. Good afternoon, y'all. Good afternoon.
Want to say good afternoon. It is a wonderful Wednesday. It's the day after elections in the city of Tallahassee and in the county of Leon. Want to say good afternoon to all of you. Listen, I want you to do something for me. Go ahead on and call a neighbor, call a friend. Let them know that the Great James Community Show is on the air. And today I'm going to be joined by the conscious chick herself, Christy Henry. Believe it or not, you're becoming a regular. We go from 1 week to what?
I know. You might as well call me the fact check chick today because I got all your stuff for you today.
Okay, it's the fact check chick. And then I'm going to certainly be blessed to have with me today a young man who I'm going to declare is one of the up and coming political strategists, and that's Lamonte Moyer. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Good afternoon, sir. How's it going? I'm great. Thanks for inviting me out.
Oh, man. Well, listen, we're glad to have you. Mm-hmm. Hey, listen, Facebook family, I want you to go ahead on the tag, share. Let's get everybody in. We're going to talk about what happened on yesterday, the outcomes. We're going to give some insight. And guess what? We may give room for a few callers. Mm-hmm. So we're excited about all of that. And we're going to get our show going. Just really talking about here we are in primaries are over, mm-hmm. Getting ready for the general. What was your thoughts when you looked at the overall election of our city and of our county?
I was excited yet disappointed, of course, with obviously the ones that I loved and chose and served with the folks, you know, with the major folks that I was championing. But we had some winners too, right? We had some folks that won as well that we endorsed. One thing that excited me more is to see a lot of the newcomers really do well, right? Because there was a time when you ran for office and you were new to running for office, you didn't do all that well. But we have people who are non-incumbents who are really posting up some really huge numbers. And that's because people are really starting to grab hold of this concept that it doesn't just take systemized election process. It takes community outreach, community touch. And so I think that is what we really see playing out here. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in November with some of our major races.
Well, you know, we're going to talk about, I think you started off by saying, you know, a little disappointed, and I'm sure a little disappointed.
Not a little.
But we're going to talk about that because, I mean, at the end of the day, the Bible talks about we all run for the prize. And one of the things that we do like to know is that we've gotten the prize. And we're gonna talk about a few of your disappointments, how you look at it, and then we're going to dive into some in-depth races that have taken place. Lamonte Moyer, let's talk just for a minute. You've had the opportunity. First of all, I'm grateful. Let me say thank you to the both of you all. And then there are so many others who are part of our team that I can certainly give a big shout out to. But let's talk a little bit about you, because I have really labeled you as a political strategist, and I did that prophetically. And normally when I do a prophetic utterance, it gives birth to the manifestation of something great. Now, looking at the political landscape, how long have you been engaged in the political arena?
Couple weeks, about 2 to 3 weeks.
Oh, wait, okay, stop them now, because sometimes people don't understand that community love is political. And a lot of times it's warfare. So let's restate that question.
Well, I tell you, he's been engaged in the community forever. I mean, well, first of all, let me say this, because I think what's going to happen today is the fact that, and man, I like that shirt you got on. It said Greg James for House of Representatives, District 8, Alkey. I love that shirt. We're going to talk a little bit about that guy who was running for District 8. But listen, you said about 2 weeks, and Christine, we've had the pleasure of knowing this young man for maybe some years now. I've had the pleasure of knowing him for a long time. But 2 weeks engaged into the political arena. Let's talk a little bit, because I want to drive into that. Let's talk a little bit about the Monte then and the Monte now. Growing up on Basin Street, who was that Monte?
The Monte on Basin Street was smart but bad, in part of the environment, product of the environment, enjoyed the environment, but just made poor choices and had consequences for those choices, and accepted the consequences and stayed in the community and loved the community, loved on the community, and wanted to see the community do better.
So part of an environment, made some bad choices. Did those bad choices lead you to college, or did they lead you to prison?
Both.
Okay, let's talk about it.
They my choices had me in prison first, and I came home and still didn't have it right, so I ended up going back to prison within 6 months. And I made some promises, and some promises was made to me with the Lord. And I came home out of prison and got on the right track. And after I got out of prison the second time, I went to college and just stayed engaged in the community.
What gave you such a love for the community?
It was just nice to me growing up. It was a great atmosphere growing up.
Now, Christine, you are heavily engaged in community. And this is what's going to drive this conversation today, because we're going to talk about election, but elections are born out of community.
Or should be.
Or should be. Okay.
Or should be. Community love is political, and love is warfare. And when you deal with love on the level of the communities that we love, we deal with the Frenchtown, Griffin Heights, Southside, you're dealing with legacy Black neighborhoods that have experienced regressive investment that has led to regressive return on investment for homeowners and folks that grew up and made sure that you acted right and you got home for the stoplight. Those folks have owned and lived in those communities for years, and due to many factors, some public policy in terms of infrastructure investment, some just systems being missed in terms of public safety systems, adequate, literate public safety systems that respond to the community needs in culturally appropriate ways, right? I want to make sure that's stated. Those things lend to value. And when you're dealing with other communities that are not Black communities, or that are, not highly culturalized by the African-American experience, those communities tend to have the infrastructure. They tend to have the public safety mechanism. They tend to have the involvement. But our engagement on the community level has value, because it creates somebody who can go to university, to prison, and then come back to the community and find themselves as a political strategist for a campaign. So my whole point of bringing that up is that our communities have value, and sometimes on the political front that's not seen. And so we have to war. We have to advocate, right, for those things to happen. And part of advocacy is making sure the right people are in place to advocate for the right public policy that positively impacts our community. Let me back down a little bit. I've learned to breathe.
Okay.
All right. Let me back. So I think when you talk about leadership should be birthed from the community, you're absolutely right. It should be. But I have to be honest with myself and say sometimes it ain't. And sometimes the people that get in office don't have that acculturalization. They don't have that sensitivity. Or if they did and they get in a system where they have to desensitize themselves and work on the mainstream on the mainstream and forget that consciousness, forget that cultural connectivity. And that is where we as voters on the community level have to begin to say enough is enough. Right. We've got to strategize to have advocacy that represents the value of the communities we live, grow up in, and love. And that is where I say community should birth leadership on the public policy level. It should. And advocacy must put things in place to realize that should.
Wow. And you know, one of the things that I think is so important, listen, for those of you who are listening to us by Facebook, tag, share, this is a election roundup, but we're laying a groundwork, we're laying a foundation to show you how important elections are, yes, why you must engage. I think, Christique, you said something that is so important. We're not getting the return in community that the investment is being made. And I want to go to you, Monte, because basically you love the community because you and I both are part of the same community. One thing about this election cycle, it had 4 young men on it, and I'm getting ready to do something special with this. I've gotten a call from upstate, but it had 4 young men from the same community on a ballot. Now, here's the beautiful part about it. 4 young men from the community on a ballot in various candidacy positions. Correct. But yet it's still, each one has a different outlook of the community, but born inside of the community. What did that do for you? I mean, here it is, you're 2 weeks when I started the campaign, you made a conscious commitment to say, man, I'm walking with you throughout this process. You knew nothing about it, but the fact that at one point we stood on the corners doing something that could cause our lives to be damaged forever. Now you're saying, I want to stand on the corner with you, raising your voice to help transform the community. What did that do to you?
It just sparked a new energy in me for the outreach and advocacy in the community, because the community suffer for lack of funds. And sometimes those that know how to reach across the aisle, whether it's a Democratic aisle or Republican aisle, you have to reach across the aisle and make things happen for the entire community, not just for a select few. And so when Mr. James decided he was going to run for office, I witnessed his work firsthand throughout the community, not my community, but the city, the county, you know. And so I felt it was my duty, it was my call to step up to the plate and say, hey, I'm here to help.
And with that being said, I want to move into this, Christique, because it's so important. We see the need in the community. We're silent about the need. But then when something happens that makes the community not what we want it to be, then our voices are heard loud. Why won't we get involved at the initial stages? We know now that Basin Street is changing. It didn't just start changing. It's been changing. We know that.
Correct.
We know it may change all the way to Riley School.
Beyond
Riley School. And it won't look like the community.
Actually, will it be a Riley School?
Wow.
Well, I think that two things happen with us. And so I'm dating myself. I know I look really, really good, but I've been in these streets for 25 years. Okay. And started in Southside, started at the Bond Elementary School back when they were talking about tearing down Bond and all that foolishness. They got Weston, they couldn't get Bond. Bond rose up, was like, no, right? But around schools, there are categories of zoning that reflect the preservation of what they call school environments, right? So around Bond School, there is a thing called residential preservation, right? Okay. So you can't develop in certain ways around schools that would be in at war against the safety of those schools. So schools in the Black communities have been a huge help in preserving Black communities, because the land use has to work commensurate with the objectives of making sure that these schools are in an environment where it doesn't cause danger to the kids that are attending them, right? So you have them in residential preservation. What's happening is because you have this new urban movement, people want to build high density in the city, right? Two things. First of all, we got a growing region. Over 500,000 people coming here within the next couple of decades, right? 500. Think about that for a minute. Think about public infrastructure that we have right now. We're trying to get sewer out the Woodville. We're trying to get all these systems put in place, jurisdictions established for service utilities. All these pressing issues are now issues, right? Okay. And then you have this encroachment upon legacy Black. Now, I can only speak for my community, right? I want to speak for our community. Absolutely. You said no more Riley School. Okay. What we have to do as a community is we have to sit down and not be reactive, right? Because there's a system here. There's a process to there's a process to getting elected, and there's a process to change on the community levels. And when you see a mindset or a perspective being acted out, they know what steps to take to erode the boundaries and erode the identities of those communities. It's not a negative conversation all the time, right? But if somebody always says, I'm going to give a shout out to conversation with Nicole, we have to support what we want to keep. And if we want to keep our communities, if we want to keep our schools, if we want to keep our legacy intact, you can go back to Basin Street, see where you grew up, see where you kissed your first girl, probably. Go back and see everything that you've done on the community level because it still exists. Imagine not being able to do that, right? And that comes, that's gradual. It's not overnight. But the policies are being set right now. And that's why you have to have, and people, I say this all the time, and people get upset when I say this, like, we got about 2-3 years to get this sugar honey iced tea straight, right? If not, you might as well be looking, and with demographic change comes other things, right? All ain't negative, but at the end of the day, if our goal is to preserve our community, preserve the legacy of Riley Elementary School, preserve the legacy of all these great schools that may be categorized wrong by this testing system, the state mandates, but they're good community legacy places that we can look back on, and we have to be proactive in supporting and keeping them. And that's where elections matter. That's where representation matters.
Well, now that you said that, let's move into that, because first of all, we want to make sure that we lay the foundation of the value of the community and the value of those who are going to serve in places of representation. Understand how we're going to preserve that community. Not only that, but how we're going to empower that community, and how are we going to make sure that community remains a purpose-driven community. Our community, correct, we have taken on the responsibility of fighting against some of the things that we see coming into the community, right? Whereas other folk who living outside of the community are making decisions that don't fit the community. Correct. Like the Bennett store.
Correct. The community actually waiting to see what happens with that store. We really don't think the city gonna put a store there.
Wow. So the community is having conversation.
Well, who is having the conversation? Because if they are in a community where they're not sure what's going to go there, and there's been a conversation about what needs to go there, why are we wondering what's going to go there?
Because it's obvious the conversation you're having is not with the conversation of the community. So let's move now, because here it is. Let's talk about what we are feeling so important as we move into the next 3 months, which is moving us into our general election. Let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about the fact that 2 weeks, a little more than 2 weeks, I guess, maybe about, I made the announcement in May, I believe it was. Yeah, I made the announcement in May. We kind of got started with our campaign in about after the holidays, maybe June. You got on board, you was all in, not really knowing a whole lot about how campaigns are operated. I mean, I had a lot of experience from working in so many campaigns on the grassroots side. When you know your lane, you operate in your lane, you be effective in your lane. I know the lane that I work in.
Okay.
I know that I know the base of people that I gravitate to and I serve. That does not mean my base is limited, but that's the base that I've embraced, and that's the base that I've always wanted to empower. And I guess by you seeing me work in that base, that motivated you to say, man, if you're running, I'm all in.
Correct.
Let's talk about Christique before we go forward, because there are a lot of races we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the outcome of those races. Let's talk about a little bit about when you begin to dive into, and I've prophetically declared you as a political strategist, and I decree and declare on this station that people will be calling your name to come to do contracts with them to help them navigate through community, especially from the grassroots side. That's where all elections are won.
It is.
Would you say that?
I would definitely,
based on what you've been seeing so far.
I would definitely say it would have to start with the grassroots.
Why?
Because the voice in the community is the movement of the grassroots. The community knows what it needs more than those that sits up in the office and say they represent the community.
Can I pause? This is what I just want us to talk like. Guess what? We at Earl's Kitchen or Catering with Care or
so you want me to be candid?
Yeah, I just want to have that because
keep making it plain.
Yeah, let's make it plain. You know, let's just make it plain. You know, I mean, let's just make it plain. Let's just make it plain and act as though we don't have 15,000 listeners. The Facebook page is not running over. We just under the tree drinking some water on well, give me a good cone in Southside.
Orange and Meridian.
Well, Orange and Meridian, right across from the store. Some folk waiting on the bus, and we just decided we walk in and we take the seat. And I said, "Wow, man, look at the community." And it's election time, and the community is flooded with folk running for office. What you think about that?
I think that's awesome, especially if it's faces in the community that grew up in the community that people see every day, whether it's in the grocery store or the corner store. For instance, I say on this ballot in particular, you had 4 guys that was real to the community, that was relevant to the community, and that was relatable to the community. And each guy had their own particular platform and they had their own particular set of followers. I think that will make this election, even in the beginning, I was telling the pastor the numbers are going to turn out high.
You're telling Greg.
I was telling Greg the numbers going to turn out high. It's going to be, we got to see the simple. I'm like, hey man, it's going to be some people come to vote that don't participate because on this ballot they see faces that they know, that understands them, that knows them. And for those folks to see a Terrence, to see a Greg, to see a Hubbard, to see a Rudy, who they know been working in the community, it felt good. For me as a convicted felon to be back in the community, to see those guys, all I could do was smile every time I think about, hey man, there's 4 guys on the ballot that represent the true nature of the community.
And I think one of the things that made the election cycle so interesting was it was for we talk about the community guys. All of us had a different mantra that we moved in.
Right.
But at the end of the day, all of us had a heart and a care for the community, whether it lined up with other candidates or whether it lined up with those in the establishment. There was such a love that was being displayed. And with that being said, it generated conversation in barbershops. It generated conversation on corner stores. I remember the other day, I was just walking, putting out some signs by the Bennett store. And you know how the guys sit there in the chairs and they drink the ice and beer and they smoke and they laugh and they saw me. They're like, "Real, man, we so happy to see you running."
Right.
And I said, "Well, what makes you happy?" "Man, because you bounced back." It gave hope to folks, Christy.
I'm going to tell you what made my heart happy. When I saw when I saw Leland, Upper Bubba Leland, on the corner holding his sign, but he also is holding Diane Williams Cox's sign.
Wow.
That's, to me, that spelled a shift. You know, I don't talk to him. I don't, know him like that. But when I saw him out on that corner holding Diane's sign, it signaled to me two things. The first thing is that we need a unified agenda, and this is not a racist statement. Okay, I just want to qualify these. This ain't because I know people watch. I just have to throw this out there because people take pieces of stuff and put it together in the digital age. But I'm unapologetic about having systems of preservation for legacy African American community. I'm just unapologetic about it. Nobody. Benton Hills ain't fighting for their identity.
No.
Waverly Hills ain't fighting for their identity. Kalard ain't fighting for their identity. We the only folk somewhere that's always got to fight for our right to exist somewhere. And I've just had enough, and so the absence of a unified agenda, right? And it ain't got to be polarizing. It just needs to be capable, right? Mm-hmm. But I just think the absence of a unified agenda and agreement, because I'm a broker. I'm in agreements all the time. We don't always get everything we want on the list. Mm-hmm. But if we can agree upon items that we want, and we can work together on that same rap list, mm-hmm. and support each other, right? See each other, recognize each other. Back in the day, you better recognize each other, right? Mm-hmm. Let's do that, because those types of gestures like that, they get you thinking like, here's a Black lady running for office. She did nothing because she done ran and performed it to the best of her ability, right? Mm-hmm. And she is being targeted by, and I'm not saying this was her opponent that was doing this necessarily. There were outside people supporting the opponent, right, that were attacking this lady unjustly.
And I think that we cannot allow that in our community.
We can't allow that.
And what bothers me, this is what bothers me, and we haven't even started the election roundup. We're going to start it in a few minutes. But what bothers me is we can see what's right when it appeases us, but it's not right when it's affecting us.
Right.
I mean, here it is, and I love Diane Williams Cox. I mean, our relationship go back way back when Alan Williams ran. But here's the thing about it: when I saw Bubba make that decision to support her, what bothered me was the very people that was embracing him while he was her opposition. Now they turn to crucify him for making the choice that he felt comfortable making.
Which should be acceptable. And the reason I say that, and I haven't spoken out on this, our leaders should be flexible. We shouldn't have a leader that's rigid, that sticks to one course of action, because the population is diverse. The mindset is diverse. So our leader gonna have to be flexible as well. We should in any community, no community should have anyone speaking, in my opinion, no community should have anyone speaking for them that's not willing to not bend and break the rules, but bend on the idea that, I'm a Democrat, I only got to work with Democrats. Well, I'm in the streets, I only got to work with people in the streets. Here's how I look at it. You got a guy, he's a major drug dealer, okay? But his sister's a victim of a crime. He want her to participate with the prosecution for justice.
And he's a major drug dealer. He's running from the police.
He's running for the police. But on the other hand, he has to have his family interact and use the systems of the police for justice. So he has to be flexible in his thought process.
That's right.
We in the community leaders that's flexible in their thought process. We don't need you always hating opposition. Yeah, you can disagree, but your disagreement shouldn't affect the thousands of us to the point where your disagreement make you disagree with someone else that you like someone else who's not going to help the 80,000 people that's in this district?
Well, I think one of the things that this is for me, and I haven't even had a chance to talk with Mr. Leland, but one of the things that I saw, and we're going to move, but one of the things that I saw when he made his decision to support Diane Cox, because he had been a very strong opposition attacker of her.
Mm-hmm.
But when he made his decision, whatever reason that was, I said to myself, people don't like when you think for yourself. Ooh. For whatever reason, he decided that, wait a minute, hold up, let me rethink. And people don't like you thinking for yourself. That's why I catch a whole lot of slack, because I think for myself. You can't buy me. You can take me to dinner, but I can pay for my own food. You can't control me because I'm out of prison, so I don't have to go to the room at count time.
Well, can I give you a slip to make you vote for me?
You can't even give me a slip to make me vote for me, simply because I'm an educated voter and I know who I'm going to vote for. Okay. So at the end of the day, we've got to get to a place where we as a people begin to think for ourselves. And I'm happy that Diane Cox pulled out a victory. I love everybody in her race, but I love her a little bit more. Why? Because she's a Black woman. She's fighting, and she's already in a position that causes her to fight harder.
Exactly.
And for us to hear all of this talk about a stadium for 20, I mean, this conversation has been going on so long till I think I can write a fairy tale book about it. Mm-hmm. I mean, so we're not going to progress when we got people who feel like they can continue to hold the strings on what we do and how we do it. Mm-hmm. Oh, Greg James, you arrogant, you this, you that. But let me say this before I go any further. I want to thank all of those voters. Mm-hmm. I want to definitely thank all of those voters who believed in second chances.
Amen.
I want to thank all of those voters who believed in you're working, and we believe you'll continue to work. I want to thank all of those voters who said, Greg James, we know you made a mistake, but you've been very transparent with what you do, how you do it, when you do it. I want to thank all of those voters out of Gaston who made their way to the polls and said, you failed in our city. You humiliated our city with your fall, but we're so excited that you made the ballot and you're doing what you're doing because we believe that you will fight for us. Mm-hmm. And one of the things about this race, wow, I'm going somewhere. One of the things about this race that Greg James was in, man, he was up against Goliath.
2 Goliath.
2 Goliath, 3 Goliath, 4 Goliath.
What time? 7, 8.
And I mean, and the thing about it is we have to break up this establishment who feels that they can direct the traffic the way they want to direct it.
I agree.
Okay? So if I know that God ordered my steps to do what I did, then I know that God gave me some great revelation in the process of what I was doing. And what did he show me? He showed me that the establishment said, well, Greg, if you're going to win, you need to raise lots of money. You got to raise lots of money. I said, no, I don't. I'm going to take the $20 from Miss Mary, the $50 from Bobo, the $100 from Sam, and we just going to keep on rolling. Mm-hmm. And guess what we did? We took the 2 little fish and the 5 loaves of bread. Now, could I have raised $200,000? Of course. I have millionaire friends who called and told me, I said, no, I don't need your money. Because it ain't about your money. It's about people. Mm-hmm. And if people can see your heart, then guess what? They'll move to the call to action. Yes. And that's what happened. Mm-hmm. And guess what? Your money can't control nothing.
Right.
Because you're making an investment and you're looking for a return. But when you get money, on top of money, you ain't looking for an investment. You're looking for control. And Greg James will not be, can you say it for me?
Control.
Control. No matter what you say about it.
Yeah.
All right, listen. Oh my God, that was just a fresh moment there. That was a moment. And remember now, we're on Orange and Meridian.
Yeah, Orange and Meridian.
Yeah. One of the homeboys just drove by on his bicycle, hollering the tree.
I think we got to get back to what you were saying about, taking the fish and I see it differently. I think we just went on in the temple and turned over the money changer table, because I think that. Unfortunately and fortunately, and I recognize being a person who graduated in political science, being a person who understands the historic context of the struggle, right? Mm-hmm. I understand that we have had to have systems in our community that exist in order to be able to circumvent and to fight against injustice, all right?
Absolutely.
So I don't want to decry or discount anything that groups like the NAACP and the Urban League and the Black Panthers and all these established. I don't
want to discount.
No, I ain't saying that's what you did.
But I want them to be real to the mission.
Can you let me finish?
Yeah.
Y'all, we on the corner store, all right? We have a couple
and on the corner, you just break in.
What I'm saying here is when we take those systems that we've had to use, all right, to break down walls, and we use them same systems to create new walls for the very people we fought for. That's a problem. That will always be a problem. And I'm not saying that this is me I'm not being as real as I could be. So I'm trying to be on the corner store and remember people watching and the clicking going on the screen. But what I'm saying is that we cannot copy the same behaviors and adopt the same mindset of the very oppressors that we have fought for. If we're going to be about equity in our community, then we have got to flatten our own community hierarchies. We have got to stop this. And the only way we do this is by what you said earlier. Grassroots informed people have got to rise and demand seat 8 and every goddamn other seat that represent the voice of the people represent the voice of the people. But I can't come to you with just my mouth. I got to come with what? Statistics, data, best practices. I got to come with actionable stuff, right? So it ain't enough for me to just have a voice. I got to have a plan. And that's where I go back to the original point. We got to have a plan. We got to be able to gauge progress. We don't know what progress looks. What do it look like?
And I agree with you. And that's what I believe the community actually, when I say the community, I'm talking about the single mothers. I'm talking about the young men that grew up without a father. I'm talking about those that's struggling to put gas in their cars right now. I'm talking about those that's wondering where their next paycheck, how the next paycheck gonna look. Or those that's working at a Walmart that's borrowing against their next paycheck. That's what I'm talking about when I say the community. And when I'm thinking about the community, I'm looking at the community. They got to get engaged. We argue, we fuss, we fight. We get on Facebook and we talk about the things that's unworthy to talk about, and yet and still every day on what it is up here on South Monroe Street, there's decisions being made that's affecting us every single day while we being distracted with the little cares of the world. And these people, they go home, have them a nice drink, talk to their family and friends, and figure out, okay, what we're gonna do tomorrow. And I've been saying here for a while, let's look at the blueprint for Florida State. Okay, when these folks thought about retaking these communities and building around these communities, Florida State was winning tremendously with Bobby Bowden. So they created a plan. They knew what they was going to do and how they're going to lay it out. I don't know the plan. I don't see the plan, but I see it, what's going on around me. So here it is. Now Florida State is in the prime of their losing season. These folks are now getting more aggressive in their building. And I said that to say this. Even in their time of losing, they don't stop their strategy or their vision.
You better come on and say, boy, if I had a cup, I'd throw it at you.
But here's the thing, what you just said that is so powerful. They don't stop their strategy and their building. On the other hand, here it is, there's an influx of students coming into Florida A&M University.
Don't do it.
And no plan is in place.
Don't do it.
Okay, don't do it. Don't do it. All right, let's take the 15 minutes and wrap up. Let's take the 15 minutes and wrap up. Once again, let me say this because because entering into the race, let's House seat District 8. Big shout out to Gallup Franklin II for winning the Democrat. Big shout out to him. I mean, big shout out. He spent a whole lot of money. Big shout out. Big shout out. Big shout out to, because at the end of the day, it's a big bold step, and for me, the step was the fact that this is what God said to, and I'm always obey His voice against any other voice that I may hear.
For all of the candidates, Mr. Franklin, for everyone involved, it took a lot of courage for them to say, hey, I want to step up and speak up for this community. I give my hats off to the young men and women, for those that got thousands of votes and those that got hundreds of votes. I put my hats off to you and tell you, don't look at this as a loss. The community know you because someone voted for you. You are relevant. You are real, and people relate to you. Stay on the platform. Stay in the field. Continue to build your brand. Continue to build your base, and continue to network and connect with people. While we in the community who think we don't have a voice start to come together, unify, and create our own voice.
Well, I mean, absolutely, and I think you mentioned earlier, and we got to go through these races. But I think, but this is good conversations. Everybody is enjoying it on Facebook, and I'm sure those who are listening in is enjoying it. I think one of the things that you said was this election cycle. I was reading an article that was quoted in the newspaper today about the establishment. I think this election gave an awakening to the establishment. I think it said our community is tired of the establishment making decisions that best suits their needs. At the end of the day, I've heard, I was labeled as the hood candidate, the candidate from the hood. We don't need a hood candidate. I mean, and at the end of the day, we got to be proud of the neighborhoods that we come from. And we have to be able to identify with those neighborhoods. But that did not bother me, because at the end of the day, it's that community that accepted the fact that I came back to it to do what was necessary. And it showed up on yesterday. So I want to give a big, big shout out to the Gatson community. I want to give a big shout out to the community of District 8 that really showed up. I mean, there were so many young men and young ladies that were stopping saying, I'm voting for the first time. And I mean, it was just amazing. So no one can take away what the evidence showed on yesterday. You cannot deny that if there is someone on the ballot that can relate to the people that are there familiar, they're going to show up. And that happened, Monte.
That happened.
So District 8, hats off to Gallup Franklin. He's moving on to the general, and one thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to keep working. So whoever serves as District 8 representative, I'll be knocking on their door, and I hope that they open, because I'm going to come on in and sit down. Let's start off. Where we starting from? We got about 15 minutes.
About 15 minutes. Let's go through, because I think that the public needs to have, for the record, what we're dealing with when we talk about the necessity of representation matters, elections matter. The Leon County Schools adopted total budget is $641 million.
Wow. $641 million.
$641 million. The total FY 2022 budget for Leon County. Now, this is last year, not this year. They haven't adopted their entire budget just yet. But the entire budget from last year in just Leon County alone, all right, it was $271,931,748 million. Wow. To make sure I got that number right. The total budget fiscal year 2021, that was the previous year. Okay. God, dog. That was just the operating budget I just stated. Okay, that's just operating. Total budget is $199,442. That's just for last year's budget. We're going into the adoption of this year's budget. I just want to give people a point of reference. For the city of Tallahassee, the 2022 budget, capital budget for Tallahassee, city of Tallahassee, was $273.2 million.
Costs much to run the school as it does.
That's just the capital improvement plan. That's just the capital improvement, and this is the big number. State of Florida. The state of Florida's budget for FY 22-23 is $112 billion. Wow. Okay, so when we talk about why elections matter, if you don't have an advocate in there working to secure resource and funding for your area, then you ain't got no room to complain about anything. That's why we work. That's the whole point.
And guess what happens when you just said that? The whole reason is to bring home, as they said, the bacon. Time out for sitting on the floor. Exactly. You better try to find a seat at the table. Okay? Because resources are needed in our community. And if very you can't, that's the whole key. Our governor's race. I mean, and we painted a picture to show what these budgets look like. And for the county of Gadsden to be at number 67, I mean, that has to change. Resources must be brought to the county. And then there must be a level of accountability so that we are sure that they're going where they need to go and doing what they need to do. If you keep doing the same thing, then you're going to get the same results. We don't even want to talk about the election that took place in Gadsden. Okay, let's go starting with the state election, the governor's race.
All right, we got our unofficial results here. And with the governor's race, let's start with the U.S. Senator's race. That's Val Demings, who got 84% of the vote.
What does that mean? 84%. What does that mean when we see that number?
That means that of 136 precincts that have reported, she got 33,539 votes, and she unseated Mark Rubio, basically. I mean, no, she didn't. She got the ability to move forward to the general election to be able to go against Mark Rubio.
Okay, great. And she's been doing a lot since she's been in Congress. She was a chief of police in Orlando and went on to Congress doing a lot. And I really thought it was a big step for her to take on the challenge, because I was saying she was just getting in Congress, just understanding the framework. But man, she has really made a great impact. So she's going on to November. All right. Let's go next.
We have Charlie Crist, overwhelming in Leon County. He got 24,055 votes with all precincts reporting. That's 59% of the vote here.
So more than likely throughout the whole state, I mean, he's moving on to face Governor
DeSantis in the general.
Yeah, my phone was ringing this morning. I didn't know whether he was calling me to see that I want to be the running mate. It kept ringing. I mean, you know.
So your phone all right, but look this morning. Okay, Attorney General, we got Aramis Ayala, who made a huge. I mean, she's making a huge splash. 44.8% of the vote.
Now she was state attorney in Orlando. She was the state attorney in Orlando, had the big war with Governor Rick Scott, and now she is moving on to run for attorney general. Okay.
Which would be a historic placement.
Absolutely.
Okay, so agriculture, that's going to be interesting. Nikki Fried's replacement, Wilton Simpson, the Republican, pulled about 72%, and the Democrat field for that position is really kind of mixed. It's less than 50% on all fronts, so we'll see. District 8 representative, of course, we spoke on that, but I just want to put a plug in it. Gallup Franklin got 34% of the vote, Hubert Brown 23%, and Gregory James 21%. Marie Radican 14% of the vote. This is the crazy piece, which is speaking of that voice you talked earlier. Sharon Letman Hicks got 6% of the vote without an active campaign.
Right.
So I think it goes to what you're saying, is that there are people who want to be touched and who are voting for people they know, like, and trust. And we've got to capitalize that with the formalized agenda. I'll keep going.
Okay.
County Judge Jason Jones sailed right on in there with 68% of the vote.
And Jason Jones was appointed by Governor DeSantis, but Jason Jones, here's the thing now. Here's the thing. He has been a actively engaged judge in the community.
Has been. I've seen him.
He's been actively engaged. He wasn't actively engaged because he was running for office. He was actively engaged prior to running for office. The community has to be a part of those who are going to serve in the community. How can you judge from the bench and you don't even know the community? Okay, let's keep going.
Good point. This commission at large group really proud of the races that Rudy Ferguson, Pastor Ferguson, Josh Johnson, Nick Maddox, Dominique Zumbo, who, look forward to meeting her in person. But Nick Maddox pulled that with 43% of the vote. With
actually, I think they're gonna have a runoff.
And
Josh Johnson has a runoff.
Right. So this is the rule for local partisan, nonpartisan races, because all local races are nonpartisan, meaning that it ain't Democrat or Republican. It's you vote for who's on the ballot, who you like. If you get 50 plus 1% of the vote, you move on and win. If you don't, you have to go to a runoff in November. If you get less than 50%, definitely. 51% or less, 50% or less, you go off to a runoff. These are unofficial results, and you're going to see some of these numbers have changed even since last night. But Josh Johnson, who got 30%, 30.92, because I know that 92 is real important to him. And Nick, who got 43.02 of the vote, they will be proceeding to November in a runoff, and they are 13, maybe a little under 13 apart. In this, 13% percentage points apart. So if Zumbo or Ferguson throws their support, whoever they throw their support or their voters throw their support behind, that's what's going to decide this election.
Right. And let's go back to House District 8 race, because that race was closed to nothing but Democrats. Because a lot of people have asked, will there be a runoff? And that race was closed. So therefore, the winner of that race wins the race, only because there is a candidate from the Republican side that is going to be in the general election. So there will not be a runoff for that seat. All right. Just wanted to clear that up because so many people have been asking, are you at a runoff?
Right.
And it's not a runoff because it's a state seat. It's not a local seat. It's in a local district for the state house seat. And if it was a local, there can be a runoff. The only thing can happen here is a special election, which has to come from the governor. But this it's over, it's done. Mr. Franklin has won. But this special election is something that's totally different. With Josh and Mr. Maddox, they would definitely have to have a runoff. And I said that because I just wanted to talk to the folks on live and let them know when there's a local election, to piggyback off what you're saying, if you don't carry the 50+%, you automatically enter into a runoff. And I only wanted to say that because this is where it gets important that you know your candidate, that you go and support your candidate, and that the community could differentiate when there's a fill-in on the ballot to split the votes. These are things we have to start educating the community on. And I wanted to piggyback on saying why so many votes count. So if the folks don't know, well, I like Rudy or I like Monte, but I'm going to vote for Christique. Well, here's the deal. You really got to choose either me or Rudy and help us get over whether we're going to beat Christique. Because what's going on in Leon County and Tallahassee particularly, we have organizations deciding they're going to put two of their friends in a particular race that split the votes, so that their particular person automatically win. And the community must know how these games are being played with their votes, so we can stop the establishment. Because if the establishment gets stopped from playing these games, then these communities can start having the person that they know can represent them in that seat.
And not only that, but you said something that was so key. and people should not allow people to put them in races and then they feel a sense of abandonment because now you don't have the financial support, nor do you have the wherewithal, the human support that you need. But for them, it's an agenda. Correct. And when you find these groups that are doing that and people who look like us are participating in the process, I mean, you're doing worse than what you said a white man do to us. Exactly. You're doing it to your own people. And that's just absolutely hypocritical.
Very.
Y'all, we gotta get down this list.
Oh yeah, we gotta get down this list. And we're running out of time.
We're running out of time.
We're running out of time.
Okay, right? So what? No, absolutely. All that has been said. But okay, let's go. Shout out real quick to incumbent Bill Proctor, who maintained his District 1 seat with 57.81% of the vote. In District 1, and definitely
we got to give a big shout out to Terrence
Barber.
Yeah,
great.
I mean, he was very energetic. Mm-hmm. I mean, very informative, and I think that the future holds some great things for him on the community engagement side. So, big shout out to him. Okay,
absolutely.
There's a seat in this. There's a seat for him soon, whether it's the city commissioner, county commissioner, the state office. Terrence, you did a great job, my friend. Mm-hmm. Keep it up.
Great campaign, and shout out also to Donna Pearl, who got her campaign started very late, but carried 18% of the vote. Also, Sabrina Allen, for running for District 2, but that race will go into a runoff between Hannah Crow and Christian Cabin going into the November election. So, and that seat was the seat of the late Jimbo Jackson. So very important. Also, District 3, Rick Minor carried his seat and incumbent. Congratulations, Rick. But big shout out to Joey Lamar, who had a really huge grassroots campaign, was door to door, really serious. Look forward to great things from him as well as Damon Victor. One time for Paula DeBose Johnson. Yes. And okay, so she will be heading into November in a runoff against David O'Keefe, who carried 27.44% of the vote. Paula carried 25.97% on the vote. Do not underestimate the power of girlfriends with support and power. She really ran a very upstanding race. Very proud of her. Looking forward to that District 5 race in November. And for school board district, we have, of course, Alva, who retained her seat with 53.54% of the vote. We have Alex Stimley. Am I saying his name right? Stimmel. I hope Alex, I don't know you, but I hope I'm saying your name right. He carried 46.42% of the vote. He is the in a runoff with Laurie Lawson Cox moving forward into November for school board District 4. Would love to have a conversation with them. That seems like that'd be a good conversation.
Absolutely.
And finishing up at 2:58, and you know we ain't got time to deal with this, is this mayoral race.
Wow.
With John Daly and Christian Dozer almost flat foot and nosedive at 46.08, 45.68. This is insane.
But I cannot continue to hear no more commercials about dope chemistry.
I know, dope. I mean, let's put a death nail to dope.
Yeah,
Speak a death nail to dope.
Let's find another ad. Let's find another conversation, because we're going to talk more in details about that race, and we're going to talk about what needs to happen and what has been happening when it comes to the African American community with both of those candidates, because both of those candidates have been able to speak and have been able to vote on issues with our Black community. And some of them haven't been favorable. So we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to make sure that our community is informed, that our community knows the facts. Mm-hmm. And when you go out and vote, you can make a factual decision.
That's right. And closing out this conversation, of course, congratulations to Commissioner Jeremy Matlow, who did maintain his seat with 55.79% of the vote. And shout out to David Bellamy for an awesome and very positive campaign. 44.21%, that is substantial. And then, of course, to Commissioner Diane Williams-Cox for retaining her seat with 52.24% of the vote. And a definite congratulations to Adner Marcelin and Shelby Green for your Adner got 28.75 and Shelby pulled out 19.01% of the vote. Listen, the community is stepping up, speaking out, and I think that past the election, we have some work to do.
A lot of work to do. Final words with the last 30 seconds. What's your final words to the 15,000 people that are listening to us today?
thank you all for coming out and participating in this election. Let's continue to participate, whether it's in an election, whether it's in advocacy, whether it's for the kids. Let's stay active, let's stay engaged, let's stay involved, and we can actually see the results that we desire.
That's right.
15 seconds.
201,986 registered voters, 789 ballots counted, 33.7% voter turnout. We have partially reported still votes by mail coming in, completely reported early votes, completely reported election day votes, all precincts reported. Here we go into November, community.
All right. Well, let's get moving. Let's get moving, community, and let's stay actively engaged. Listen, this is Greg James with the Greg James Community Show. Want to say thank you all once again for all of your support. Thank you so much for you stepping up, casting your ballots. I want to let you know from the bottom of my heart, those of you in Gadsden, listen, I love you more than you ever know, and I want you to know you can't do nothing about it. We're going to keep working to make things great and to make things better. Remember, together we can do it better, and I'll keep working for you. Until next week, you be blessed.